ZombieTech. Welcome to ZombieTech, a forum for engineers, scientists, and inventors to ponder on the technologies needed to survive the inevitable zombie apocalypse.
She's Addie.
He's Whisker.
And who do we have this week? It feels kind of cramped in here.
This week we have awesome Roy Eltham and awesome Mark VandeWettering of the Brainwagon blog.
2 regulars on the show.
Yes, and 2 regulars in our IRC. Hi guys.
Hey.
So, we wanted to cover a little bit on Maker Faire because we weren't able to make it, and I know that a lot of us who weren't able to make it, were extremely jealous, and you two got to have the full experience. So,
yeah, it's sort of like the the new thing to tweet about because, you can make everybody else jealous if they can't go. So you can just tweet repeatedly about it.
And we saw a lot of that over the weekend because
I was
not only were these 2 previous ZombieTech guests at Maker Faire, I counted no less than 13 previous ZombieTech guests at Maker Faire this year. And
that's like a third.
Yeah, that's a lot. So our Twitter was just blowing up with Maker Faire stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a good thing we had the eclipse to sort of take over at the end there so that you wouldn't have to endure it forever.
Well, then you just end up with like a bajillion eclipse photos and tweets and looking at it through my sunglasses and a pinhole camera.
Yeah, I saw a lot of combined tweets right at the end where people who had just finished up at Maker Faire got together right after and made pinhole boxes and stuff like that, and we're doing photography in groups of little islands of geekdom here and there around San Francisco area.
Yep. So for those who don't know what Maker Faire is, can you guys explain what it is?
No. I mean, okay, I guess we could try.
Absolutely not.
Roy doesn't even want to try. I'm more patient because I haven't been on as often as he has. Let's see. So the Maker Faire is sort of an odd combination of events. Nominally, it's a sort of like a country fair where people bring sort of weird projects that they've constructed themselves for, just to share with other people. And I think that's sort of the thing that attracts me to it. There's also a fair number of small companies, some not so small companies, sponsors who exhibit stuff there, which might be of interest to sort of the do-it-yourself maker community. And let's see, there's all sorts of other sort of tertiary things that you might not imagine. A lot of steampunk kind of guys, a lot of just sort of Burning Man sort of art projects show up there. It's a really odd combination of things, but it's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. And lots of metal contraptions spewing propane flames.
Yeah, there's a lot of propane, a lot of steampunk leather things going around, robots, lots of robots, and lots of 3D printers this year. That was the thing that really sort of blew me away, was just how many tables seem to have a 3D printer on them.
Yeah, somebody claimed that there were 23 different printers represented, and something like 49 of the booths had a printer of some kind.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you guys have the overall statistics for how many booths there were and all that?
I don't. I heard that there was over 100,000 people on the 2-day.
Wow.
So it was really busy. I thought it was busier on Saturday. One of the guys at Pixar who I know, Tony DeRose, who was the father of all the kids, the sort of leader for the Viper flight simulator project, which has been getting quite a lot of press. He said that he thought it was Sunday that was the most crowded because at the end of Sunday he was completely zorched from talking to people.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, they had some of the famous people talking, like Adam Savage, on Sunday. So I think there was portions of the day on Sunday where it was more crowded, but then as the day went on, it seemed like Sunday afternoon was lighter to me.
Yeah, well, it closed up at 6 on Sunday, and there was the eclipse, and there was also the Beta Breakers, which is a big event in San Francisco.
The race, I think, the marathon.
We know a few people who didn't go Sunday because they were preoccupied with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I usually actually do the beta breakers myself, but I decided not to this year.
Okay.
You got enough of a marathon in the day before and the day of just walking around Maker Faire, I'm sure.
That sort of felt like it, certainly.
Yeah. My ankles were not happy at the end of the weekend.
So, how? I guess just walk
one
us.
second.
Oh,
There was a pretty good suggestion the other day, earlier in the week. Somebody suggested that next year, if toy makers can make it out there, that we should bring sandbags and create a temporary zombie bunker in the middle of Maker Faire and just pack it full of comfortable places to sit down so that people can make pit stops and just sort of hang out on their way around.
There was one booth with a bunch of bean bags.
dude. Yes.
It would be really nice to actually have. There's sort of I'll reveal myself to be horribly antisocial and things, but when you're actually in the middle of a huge crowd like that continuously, just the kind of din of it kind of gets to you after a while, or at least it does to me. And it really would be kind of nice to have an area, some place at the fairgrounds where you could actually sit for a minute and perhaps regain your composure and stuff. There are some benches around. You can kind of do it, but it can get kind of tiring, particularly if you're running around all the time chasing kids or something. I saw a lot of haggard-looking parents because actually a lot of people bring their young kids to it. They seem to think that there's lots of good stuff for them. Whether there was a lot of good stuff for them, but there were a lot of kids playing with Legos, a lot of sort of craft projects that they set up for kids. But
they had a learn to solder tent.
Yep,
Mm-hmm.
which is pretty cool. And I sort of know, despite what the parallax thing might have taught people about my ability to solder, I sort of know, so I didn't bother going in there. But,
I didn't go in the tent. It was always a big line coming out of it.
Was it the same S2 robot badge that we?
No, they had their own little Maker Faire badge.
I see.
I think actually Radio Shack also had a learn to solder thing that they sponsored. I didn't look too closely.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
But
So
Radio Shack was nice because they had a thing where you could charge your cell phone, which proved to be actually useful for me.
Oh, nice.
It's like the only time Radio Shack has been useful to me in the last year.
Yeah. So it was like a little mailboxes, locked mailboxes like at an apartment, and you would open it up and pull out the charge cord, plug your phone in, and then you could lock the thing and take the key so that you could leave your phone and go wander around.
That's very
and
handy.
it wouldn't get stolen, and then you come back.
It was an excellent idea.
Yeah, that's very
I
handy.
think if you combined that with a big solar panel or something, you'd totally have a maker project,
Mhm.
Right.
Ooh, that is a good one.
And it would be good in case, your phone ran down during the zombie apocalypse, too.
Oh, yeah, exactly. You could lock it in different locations.
Just be careful the one if it were like sponsored by Gazelle or something like that, because they make their money recycling phones, and that would be one good way to get a whole lot of them.
Yeah.
Actually, that would be an excellent thing to do. I could just get a big box, label it, send it to Gazelle. People could lock their phones up. That would be awesome. I don't know where your phone's went. It's just like a Kickstarter project, You send us money. We don't really have to give you anything back. I'm sorry.
So, like,
now I know why I'm not on this show more often.
You're so silly. So, like, for a lot of the groups of people who have large online presences in our community, or our maker community, like Dangerous Prototypes, EMSL, I don't know.
Lady Ada was there.
Lady Ada. Like, what did they have? What did they show?
I don't think Lady Ada had a booth. They were just there walking around. I think they gave a talk, or Phil was part of one of the talks or something.
I said she was hanging out at the Beagleboard setup
okay.
for a while. So I don't know exactly. I thought kind of looked for a while like she was sort of camped out there, but maybe she was just there coincidentally. I didn't have a chance to go and talk to her.
They had some of their projects in the Maker Shed building, being sold, some of their products.
Okay.
As did a lot of the other small companies, Parallax and Spark Fun. They all had in the Maker Shed building, they had this big building. You go in and buy stuff, and a lot of it was on sale. And they had stuff from a lot of the smaller companies mixed in with the stuff that they sell normally on the Maker Shed site.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, even
I saw
I bumped into
projects in there. So
yeah, I bumped into Jeff Kaiser, who has his own line of Geiger counter kits that he sells, and he was sort of hawking his wares there.
Mm-hmm.
Sunday, so I got a chance to talk to him. He had a
cool
really kind of go ahead.
He had a cool ambient music thing going with the several Geiger counters hooked up to Arduino and a music shield plugged in, and based on the radioactive ticks coming off the counters, it would cause a different note to play. And then he had different radioactive marbles stuck on the Geiger counters to create different rates. So it created this sort of cacophony of tones.
Cool.
I bet the ambient radiation at Maker Faire is actually higher than normal as well. Because, well, not just because a lot of the people that go to it might play with hot stuff, but because so many people fly in and they get such a high radiation dose going up that high in the atmosphere that the general, ambient radiation levels got to be higher inside of Maker Faire than outside of it.
I think it's just caused by, the fact that they're basically mutants. But
well, there were more Geiger counter projects around the fair, and people had little bits of radioactive material to test it. It's all safe, low radiation stuff, but
until
it's still,
you put it together.
Well, no, it's all little like microscopic amounts. Ultimately,
there's a lot of Alan Yates type of people out there that like to build Geiger counters and play with hot stuff. So,
okay. So let me ask. I mean, year to year, like we know people who bring the same project back to Maker Faire year to year to year to year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So did you guys see just the same projects that you've seen before, or did you see any new projects that was somewhat cutting edge? I mean, was there anything like that?
Well, you want to go first?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there were a lot of the things that are there every year. Some of the big metal dragon contraptions that they have out in like the parking lots and various fields around the fair. They just keep bringing them back every year. But then there were occasional new things even in those that weren't there before. Did they have the Wally robot group there last year?
I think that there's a group that basically builds. They're on the internet as well. There's a couple of groups that like to build robotic movie robots of various kinds. So this year I counted 7 R2D2s, which I think is a larger number than I've seen there before, and 2 really nicely done Wally robots, which is kind of cool since that was one of the movies I worked on. So I like Wally a lot. So he's cute.
You worked on Wally?
Oh yeah.
Best movie ever.
We didn't really give these guys a proper introduction because so many of our listeners already know them, but Roy does graphics engines for Sony Online Entertainment, and Mark does, rendering engines, I suppose would probably be a better way of saying it, for Pixar.
Yep.
I do all sorts of stuff for them. But for Wally, I did lots of Star Effects work for that.
Cool.
And it was fun. So anyway, there's lots of good stuff like that. So you do see the same projects over and over again. The electric giraffe is one that I see every year, especially since in the very first Maker Faire I exhibited, he was parked right next to me the whole time. So
okay.
I always seem to notice him when he's there. But there's new stuff. People bring new Burning Man projects. There was I can't think of the name of the project. It had some sort of Ouroboros type name or something, which was a long sort of vehicle that had LED lights in it and looked like a big snake. It was very cool. It was at Burning Man, I think. I don't go to Burning Man myself, but lots of people I know do. And so I've seen pictures before. So that was kind of cool. And, people do bring new stuff. I bumped into Ben Krasnow. He brought his, what do you call it? Electron microscope. which was kind of
wow.
project. That guy's seriously, what's the word? Talented, insane,
Yeah.
some combination of the two.
Like genius.
Yeah, genius is a good word. Yeah.
Didn't he put the LEDs into his eyeballs or something?
No.
I think that
Was that a different
him?
guy?
Maybe that was a different guy.
Because he didn't have LEDs in his eyeballs when I
No,
I
think whoever did it found it was painful, and they decided not to do it anymore.
They put in like their contact lenses.
Right, they sandwiched 2 contact lenses together with an inductive loop to power the LEDs. That might have been Ben. What I think of with Ben is the electron microscope, and then he also has done. He made a chamber to produce liquid CO2 under pressure out of acrylic that was kind of cool. And he's done a couple of food things lately, like bubbling nitrogen through chocolate so that it's all foamy and sort of open, airy. Yeah. And
he tried to do that with avocado, and it didn't really do much. It did expand slightly under pressure, but then he even tasted it afterward and said it tasted about the same. And so he just put that video up a couple days ago.
Maybe the guacamole would be airier and fluffier.
Maybe.
Well, guacamole's delicious anyway. I like
And it sounded like both of you guys got to meet a bunch of other ZombieTech guests and ZombieTech listeners.
Yeah, Roy probably did a slightly better job of that. I did it mostly by hanging around Roy.
Well, I mean, on the first day, the first thing I did practically once I got in was go and watch Joe and Zaz talk about Prototype This.
Mm-hmm.
And then hung out and met with them, chatted with them afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And right next to that, right outside when I was talking with them, we got Rick from the IRC channel, Rick 000.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Came up and said hello. And then Alvaro, I think, was also around at that point.
Yep.
And then, it was kind of neat finally getting to meet Zaz in person.
Yeah.
Chat with him about programming and whatnot, which was probably boring for everyone else, but it was kind of cool for me.
And that's all that matters.
And, I'm not sure where I was going with that, but that was the first 2 people I met, and they're, you just had them on 3 episodes of ZombieTech recently.
Yep. And, all talking about Prototype This, so.
and the other more famous person that I met was at the Bring a Hack dinner afterward. I met Joey.
Yeah,
Joey
yeah.
Reddy.
And got a picture with him, and he was like, really, I said, I'm friends with the toy makers, and he's like, did they come? He was all excited, and then I was like, no, they couldn't make it, and he was like, oh, he was bummed, but he was still happy to meet me as
we would have liked to see him.
Yours.
Yeah, that's funny. So, why don't we go? What projects? Let's go for 5. Maybe 5. Maybe that's too many.
So
3.
wait though. So Joey was at the Bring a Hack dinner after.
Yeah.
Now who hosts the Bring a Hack dinner?
Jerry Ellsworth.
Okay, so that's a Jerry thing.
Well, she kind of organized.
Sylvia there as well, and her
Sylvia
dad
was there. Super awesome. Sylvia was there. You name it, and they were probably there. I mean, Mighty Ohm, Ben Krasnow,
Crafter.
The Dangerous. Huh? Who?
Crafter.
Crafter, Ben Heck, and Parker, Longhorn Engineer, were all there. The Ian from Dangerous Prototypes was there.
Mm-hmm. Chris Gamble
was there for a little while, though he was not feeling well and left. Lane was there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was wondering if Lane was there, but I thought he had to leave early.
He did have to leave early, but he made it to the dinner for a little while and then took off.
I remember him leaving because he said he was leaving, and then the next tweet that he put out was that I'm on New Zealand Airlines. I hope I got on the right plane.
Let's see. It was kind of interesting because at the Harry's Hofbrau where the Bring a Hack dinner was at, the Make group also had an after party in that place.
Oh, okay.
So I saw Dale Doherty and some of those other Make people there they were like in the bar and another section of the restaurant, but there was sort of like cross pollination between that and the hack party.
Mm-hmm.
So,
mm-hmm.
and
sounds like a lot of nerds in one place.
Yeah, and it was really loud because everyone was talking and sharing their projects, and there was lots of LED lights and craziness and
controlled explosions.
There weren't any controlled explosions.
Next year. There's always next year.
All right, Eddie, you were asking about memorable projects from the show floor there?
Yeah. So I wanted to see what you guys thought on the first day, 3 projects that you thought were interesting. They could be projects, they could be presentations. And then so 3 projects for Saturday, 3 for Sunday.
Wow. Go first, Mark, because I don't know.
Well, I mean, if you've been following any of the press for this, I think you have to plug the Viper project, which was a flight simulator that it was started as a Kickstarter project. Actually, they raised about several $1,000s, $12,000 to put together a Viper flight simulator, and happens to be the kids that were all between 13 and 17. Under the direction of Tony DeRose, who's a guy also at Pixar, who is pretty keen on this whole young maker thing, and obviously a very patient dad to allow such a huge project going on. It was kind of cool. I mean, they basically had a complete hang you upside down kind of flight simulator setup with 3 video screens inside, and you could actually sit inside, and it would, you can spin around. I'm told that the flight characteristics were actually more like a 747 than a Viper, because, well, it would be kind of dangerous if you could really pull high G's while whipping around. I guess under full load, the motors that they had to spin you could reach 20 RPMs, which is, if you're actually sitting in it, that's probably pretty nauseating. But but sadly, that for safety reasons, they couldn't really allow just sort of people off the street. They'd originally intended to allow kids from the age of 13 to 17 to put their names in, and they would draw some so that they could all some number could fly. But safety regulations, it sort of actually has to be classified as a ride, I guess, and they didn't want some safety inspector to come to the Maker Faire and then realize that there's all sorts of unsafe things going on, potentially.
What? Propane? What?
Propane explosions, big jagged metal things, I mean, they didn't want to be the person who screwed it all up for everybody. So probably sanity prevails. They had a lot of press. I'm told that there was a guy next to them who brought a complete Cylon costume, and they had like the I can't think of the boss Cylon guy from the old series. What was his name? God, I'm losing my mind now as I get older. Anyway, apparently this guy had seen the Kickstarter thing that these guys were going to show at the Maker Faire, and he basically said, "My wife doesn't understand my obsession with Battlestar Galactica. Can I come and play with you guys?" And they said sure. And so they had costumes and stuff set up next to that. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
And
cool.
So I kind of like that. That's getting a lot of press. It was very cool. The kids did a ton of work on it, and the youngest actually was in charge of doing most of the videography, I guess, for it. And that means, and he did a great job. I mean, he cut all these great videos you can see on YouTube and stuff about how they designed and built and moved this thing to the fair. So it's pretty cool. I mean, it was well done project, well documented, and really sort of combination of retro, teen, maker, nerd, sci-fi. Those things all sort of combine to make kind of a cool project.
Cool, very cool. So space, or the Viper simulator.
Yeah.
That was really cool. It looked kind of scary though.
Yeah, I'm kind of against being in any machine that holds me upside down. I kind of think that's when my butt's over my head, nothing good happens in that orientation.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
I
My
think
butt
gravity
needs to
is
stay
oriented.
below my head.
Yeah, center of gravity. There's something just going on there. So.
I'll let you say what your one of your favorite project was in just a bit. But did you guys notice if it was more, like really young makers or like engineer parents bringing their kids to try to get them interested? Like, what was the demographic of the
It really seemed like
people?
it was all over the place.
Yeah,
There was old and young people.
There's old people, there's young people, there's kids, people just taking their kids out for a day in the sunshine. I think there's people who are really into the technology wandering around. I mean, I've exhibited there before, and you really, some people are intensely interested in what you're doing. Some people will probably, depending on what your project is, just kind of walk by. I think that's really its success, is that it manages to attract so many different kinds of people. I don't know whether I'm really critiquing it or not. I sometimes lament that we don't see more independent small projects from people. But, the fact is they're actually doing something right. And I think that, there are some corporate sponsors, some corporate presence there. And, the fact is maybe those were actually necessary to make it happen at all. So, I'm trying not to be too grumpy about it. I just think it is pretty good at attracting, everybody from doing, crazy recycling, green stuff. People have their own beehives to, electronics and 3D printing, and people who do, crazy Halloween stuff for their houses. And, I mean, there's just all sorts of stuff.
There's quite a mix of people exhibiting there too, because there's whole sections of just like crafts and clothing and stuff like that. And there was a one small building that was mostly about like growing plants and dealing with hydroponics and stuff like that.
Okay.
And then they had like the ship model guys with their model ships and a little arena pool area with mock battles, right? Remote control battleships. And they're really awesome. And then of course, like you have all these people with their electronics projects and all these little DIY servicing companies, like Parallax and Adafruit and SparkFun and Dangerous Prototypes and, Mighty Ohm selling his kits, and all these other people are there mixed in with, people that are showing their projects. And it was kind of cool because you get to see, here's some boards and here's somebody that used one of those boards to make something interesting. And they're like, a few booths away or something. And I was, me personally, I'm more interested in the technology and the electronics and the robots and all that. But there was definitely a lot there for other types of people that are interested in other things, crafts or, steampunk was a big theme for a large section of the place too.
Sure.
So
I always like their projects because I feel like
they spend a lot of time
people,
on the details.
Yeah, I think I feel like they do not only the functionality but also the aesthetics.
Right.
Which
they spend time making it look cool as well as working cool.
Exactly.
Yeah. And there's, that's part of the whole you can see art cars and things like that there that, people who go to Burning Man will sometimes bring projects like that here. And that's sort of also a combination of art and technology in sort of interesting ways, and light, people use lighting in different ways, which are interesting, and music in different ways. I mean, obviously Architect is there every year pretty much with their musical Tesla coil performances, and they're always very popular and cool and well worth seeing if you've never seen it before, certainly. Especially live, they were always crowded when they were when they had shows.
Cool.
Yeah.
So then, one of your favorite projects for you, Roy?
Yeah. So one that is kind of a small, well, sort of small, but it was really neat to see is there's this guy named Scott, Skot. He was actually co in the same booth with Dangerous Prototypes. But he had this really neat display that he had made out of, standard 8 7-segment LED displays that just look like an 8 when they're fully turned on. But he had like hundreds of them in a big grid, and then a controller controlling all of them to draw pictures, and it was animating like a guy riding a horse.
Oh,
And it was just using each segment like it was a pixel, right?
Yeah.
So up close, it looked kind of funky because it was just like the segments of a 7-segment display. But if you stepped back a little bit, it was an animating horse, right? It looked really cool. So he had like taken, 7-segment displays and turned them into a graphics display in a sense.
Very cool.
And it looked kind of cool. It was just animating a horse running, but it was just a neat thing. I've seen something similar to that. It's a similar concept where people have made graphics programs that use ASCII to draw.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of it.
Yeah,
kind of reminds me of ASCII art kind of stuff. Yeah, but it's animating as well, so that's kind of cool.
Right. They actually have some display driver wrapper things that you can call that act like a graphics engine, but they use ASCII characters to draw the display, and they just sort of approximate it.
The first one I saw of those was actually a replacement renderer for Quake or Quake 2.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have a bunch of them now, and some of them are a little more general purpose, so like you can plug almost anything into them and they'll draw. And they don't just it's not like they're just using asterisk as a pixel. They actually are approximating the density of that section of the thing with an appropriate character. And, it's kind of cool. But that was a really cool project. It was a little project, but I thought it was neat.
Very cool.
I tend to like the little, simple, cool, gadgety things like that,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the reasons that I kind of like the Maker Faire is I kind of want to go to be inspired. And it's actually kind of daunting sometimes to see some of the really huge projects where people have obviously invested, thousands of dollars, if not tens of thousands of dollars to construct something, because that's not really that accessible to people. I'm kind of interested in, we're beginning to see 3D printers and stuff come down in price. Obviously, things like the Arduino and Parallax and all these sort of computing things that are coming down in price, reaching really sort of hobbyist level price points. And I think that's really cool because then you can inspire people to actually, get some of these things and start doing stuff themselves.
Right.
I think that
we're always really careful about that on our show. We're in the process of building a very expensive, complicated studio from scratch, and most of it's DIY project stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of focusing on the big picture, we always try to turn the camera on the individual projects and explain them in enough detail where somebody could take just that part, which is a useful thing to know how to do, and do something else with that instead of looking at all from the zoomed out point of view of how to build a studio. I mean, those would be cool videos too, but we really like to get down to the nitty gritty and focus on the individual pieces.
And I think part of that is just the fear of, I've been talking to a lot of my nurse coworkers, and they think I'm crazy because of all of the electronic stuff that we do and the woodworking that they hear me doing. They'll be like, "Hey, so what'd you do this weekend?" I'm like, "Oh, well, made a desk."
And you learned how to do pocket hole joinery.
And it's really, it's just a matter of screwing two things together, and hoping that it fits right. But to other people, there's the fear of not, part of it is like the fear of not being able to do it, and that keeps them from even trying.
And Maker Faire is part of the solution to this problem.
Right.
Well, yeah, I think that there's, sort of a problem in education is that, we've been so scared that kids will have a sort of negative experience that we never actually teach them to deal with the kind of frustration that projects like this always have. I mean, nothing ever works 100%. Nothing worth doing is ever easy.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have situations where you have 3 equations and 3 unknowns.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just not. Life is not a story problem. And so when you get kids, and this year I actually was part of a group that was mentoring kids at that experimental school in Oakland, the Lighthouse School, and our kids brought projects to the Maker Faire, and it was an interesting challenge because I think that they really don't want to. This isn't universal, but I mean, you could obviously see that there is some fear that they have that they will bite off more than they can chew and that they won't succeed, and this is one of the things that I find really frustrating in a way, because I love to do stuff that I don't know how to do. Doing the same thing over and over again is actually no fun. So, you always are trying stuff, even if it's trivial stuff. It's good to just try to build up your skill set. And I think that the Maker Faire is part of that. And young makers is a really interesting concept, trying to get kids to just do the kinds of practical things that, and inspire them to try. Most kids, I actually thought the hardest part of being a mentor was going to be to teach kids, to get them through the parts that were frustrating. But I think actually even the more challenging thing for a lot of kids is just convincing them to think imaginatively with the idea that they could actually create something, that idea is like revolutionary to them, that something like, a radio or a computer isn't something that you just buy and use. It's something that you can actually, understand and manipulate in a sort of deep way. And most kids, I think, actually have never experienced that. And I think that's actually the hardest part of getting them to sort of start these kinds of projects themselves, getting them started on welding their first bike or writing their first program, or Yeah,
I think coupled to that also a little bit is this thing that I think is just a systemic problem with education, is that they're not really taught or exposed to failing. Right? They're taught that failing is super bad and you don't ever want to do that.
Whereas in the real world, failing is very, very important part of actually solving problems.
Right. And so they're kind of afraid to try something that they don't know, because their built-in mechanism that they've been taught since they started school is you don't want to fail, right? And failing is wrong and bad. And so you don't get that trial and error thing. So they do everything by memorizing and then just trying to succeed perfectly on the test by memorizing.
And that, of course, absolutely destroys one's ability to innovate. Because if the only thing you're ever doing is replicating other people's projects, you're never going to come up with anything new.
Right.
Yeah, but I think it's also... I had really interesting discussions with a number of people about this kind of topic while I was at the fair. And I think it's also, I view my projects, a lot of the projects that I do is what I call boldly going where pretty much everybody else has gone before, right? I mean, they're projects which are meant to build my personal skill set. It's not that they're necessarily innovative, but that they're things that I'm interested in and I want to learn how to do better just for my own satisfaction. And I think, that we sometimes put too much pressure on kids. It's like, well, if you're not doing something radical and new, if you're not going to be the next Steve Jobs by doing this, that you're wasting your time or something. It's not worth doing. And I kind of view it as, you got to be kind of I understand what people are saying, but you kind of also got to be careful and realize that we don't go from, innovators don't happen overnight. I think you have to have a grounding in the technology and understand it. You kind of have to work through a lot of these sort of things that practitioners do in order to actually get to the point where you can see innovation happening.
I think what Roy and I were trying to get at there was that while it's obviously, doing all of the projects that everybody has done before is how you learn the fundamentals. It's very important not to instill in a learning generation that innovation isn't the end goal, to instill the idea that replication is the end goal.
There's that, and there's just, I think that our mindset, like Mark and me especially, is we're not afraid to try things. We don't have this ingrained thing of not wanting to do something just because there's a chance we might not succeed at it. Like might fail partway through.
Obviously, because I'm talking on a podcast, I'm not scared of looking like an idiot. So,
Right, exactly. And I learned how to do computers completely by trial and error myself, right? I self-taught myself programming and messing with this stuff. And it was just because I wanted to figure it out. And so I just kept beating my head against it until I made something happen. And, you know, if I had been had started much later, on that, I probably wouldn't have gone about it the same way. And I probably wouldn't have learned it as well as I did, because I would have been more in that mindset from school. Because I definitely got that from school. Like, I ignored school after a certain point because they just kept telling me, memorize this. And I was like, well, I want to know why that formula works or why it's that way. Not just that I should memorize it and be able to spew it out on a test at the end.
All four of us are great examples of being driven to, do this kind of stuff despite, it not being rewarded necessarily. As of today, I think Mark earlier was putting an old Unix system onto a BeagleBone, and Addy.
Yeah, that's going to pay off big time.
Yeah.
It's like step 1, put Unix, PDP-11 Unix on a BeagleBone, and then step 3 is profit, and then I got to figure out what that step 2 is, and then that would be good.
Question mark, question mark, question mark.
Question mark.
Addie was getting a little frustrated earlier. She was working on getting a development tool for propeller spin language development running on her Mac. I was building a pan tilt servo head, and I wasn't sure what Roy... I don't think he had enough time this evening to get into anything, but I know as soon as he gets a chance, he's going to be working on a little graphics engine that he's playing with on the side.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we're obviously all people that go out of our way to do this kind of stuff, even though we're not doing it for any reward at the end of the day.
Right.
Well, I actually find that the reward is, subjective and it's personal. I think that one of the, I sort of hinted at this with respect to my mild criticism of the Maker Faire, which is that it's, in a lot of ways, it's less about making and more about a slightly different kind of consumerism. There's sort of DIY consumerism that occurs. But, the fact of the matter is I do my blog and my projects because they are rewarding. They're rewarding for me, and I enjoy talking about them because I get to meet people like you and Roy, and get to enjoy the kinds of things. I'm not thrilled by Twilight movies, or even I just don't have most of the sort of normal commercially driven desires, and so. The kinds of things that I enjoy, I find it rewarding. And I think it's weird that we actually increasingly as a society seem to think that all interactions between humans have some dollar sign associated with them. And if that dollar sign doesn't happen, then you're wasting your time. I really hate it when I show a project to somebody and they say, well, what good is that? You'll never make any money off that. I mean, it's just like, there's no answer to people like that. You just go, okay, well, thank you for your time. And,
it's like,
because you're just not getting it. Right. The reason I do things is because it's cool and it's neat. Fun. And I'm sure that when, Ben assembled his electron microscope, he wasn't thinking that he was going to become the newest electron microscope manufacturer, or that even that he was going to innovate in the world of electron microscopes.
Wait, you mean Addie's 5-position switch project she's working on isn't going to make money?
I'm sure it will if you can somehow merge it with an Arduino. And maybe a blinking LED.
That's the New York Maker Faire.
Oh, okay. Good enough.
You could put it up on eBay and put Arduino in the name of the auction on eBay, and it'll probably sell.
All right. So, since we are ZombieTech, we have to discuss. I'm sorry, I'm like completely tangenting here, but
I brought it up a little bit by building a zombie bunker in the middle of Maker Faire. I think that's a really great suggestion.
Right. I saw
we'll need a lot of help.
There was actually a little booth in the corner that was
like a zombie
mechanical zombie thing. Like it was like a little tiny haunted house that you went through, but they had these animated zombies with motors and crap moving.
Yeah,
around.
So that was the Cal Haunts group. They're a group that does. They build basically Halloween props as sort of their hobby, and I think like all hobbies, it's it's awesome. I mean, they had all sorts of demos of their various animatronic things that they had set up. They showed how you could take a plastic skeleton and cover it in corpsey like materials and make it look all creepy. So we could definitely use that for simulated zombie attacks. I think
training,
yeah,
practice.
Teaching people how to react.
You don't want people to panic when they see their first zombie. So
I think that would be epic if they came next year and they had their zombie thingamabob, and we were next door to them with the zombie apocalypse bunker.
Yeah,
wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah,
and we could we could have like a toy maker base, and like all the people who like are in our IRC who are individuals and have their own projects, they can show like their projects, and we can have lots of beanbag chairs because I love beanbag chairs.
That would be good too.
That'd be
awesome.
Yeah.
So they had some good stuff.
We might have to go in and get a couple of booths because the standard booth size is pretty small.
Yeah,
that's cool. We'll have a lot of people there because John said he was going to make it. I think, right? Maybe.
Well, we went. We
We'll
didn't even get to go this year, and we had 13 friends at least.
I know,
and probably more. I mean, there's probably tons of you listeners out there that were there, and we don't even know it. So I don't know. Next year, let's just go with a raft of people, and we'll start organizing like 6 months in advance and make it epic.
That'd be super fun.
That would be cool.
Super fun. So, what? Let's see. So we've actually only gone through one project that you guys were.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to cover 3 on each day.
Yeah, probably not.
So on day 2, was there anything that stuck out to either of you guys?
Well, I bumped into Jerry, who was, of course, always, incredibly popular. She was roller skating around with her Commodore 64 guitar that she had put together. So this is a bass guitar, which has a body of a Commodore 64, and had some FPGAs tying it together so that it would drive the SID chip internally, and she was enormously popular, and it made me think that if I was going to go to the Maker Faire and bring a project, it would be awesome to bring one that you could actually just carry around while you were moving, right? Mm-hmm. Because then you could actually. The problem with actually exhibiting is you kind of sit at your booth and you don't get to interact with the public and you don't get to see stuff. Mm-hmm. So I think what she's really did awesomely was, sort of have a project that really was just with her all the time and she could interact with. So,
and I've seen several mobile projects with her over the last couple of years. So she seems to have figured that trick out.
Yeah, I've put this in my list of, I should definitely do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Sometime.
The other alternative, which Ian from Dangerous Prototypes said, is get somebody else to exhibit in your booth with you, which he did with the Scott guy, and they basically tag teamed, right?
Right.
Scott would cover the booth for a while, and Ian would go wander around, and then Ian would cover the booth for a while, and Scott would go wander around. So if you guys went and you had a whole bunch of people could take turns wandering around while other people were watching the booth.
So like when people wanted to relax, they'd stay, they'd help to exhibit. The other people would go, and when they came back and wanted to relax, they'd help. I think it's a perfect situation.
But I also like the idea of being able to just carry your project around with you. That's kind of cool.
That is a good idea.
I really liked the 64 bass guitar thing because it had this. So she was doing frequency counting on the 4 strings to figure out what notes to play, but it would like drift a little. So she'd play a note and it'd be like, right? It'd like make these weird little noises, and occasionally you'd get like a little beep or boop out of the SID where she had the algorithm had sort of probably gone out of range and sent a different tone. And so it had this kind of cool 8-bit flair added into the sound when she was playing bass riffs.
Cool.
And then of course she had the actual keyboard keys would play just regular notes.
Nice.
Right. So at the same time she could play the bass riffs, she could also play notes and switch which sound, the noise, square, and sawtooth stuff. But it was kind of neat.
Question.
Yes.
I am still dubious about 3D printers, and I probably will until I hear an adequate reasoning for them that validates the cost. Because to me, the amount that they cost right now is too expensive for little gizmos.
Well, some
But
of the kits, like the RepRap kits, now you can get a complete working printer for like $500 or $600.
yep, still too much.
That's really
So-
not that much for what you're getting.
Well,
It depends. It's there are people who thought that was a lot for a printer when regular printers first came out, right?
right.
And so every time they cut the price, there's an expansion in the
User base,
user base of it. And I think when they cracked below 1,000, I think people began to take notice. And now if we're seeing $500 and $600, I think those are beginning to make some real inroads in sort of areas that might not be obvious. Not just people making prototypes, but people making toys, doing different kinds of graphics design, work, and I think there's. Go ahead.
There were some projects around the fair that people had used a 3D printer as part of, to print out something to be part of their project. So, it kind of depends on what you use it for.
Mm-hmm.
Like your experience with me and Jason Todek is we've not really done anything useful with it yet. We're still sort of learning and playing with them, but I am imagining making, fitting parts and stuff for my robot so I can make more interesting robots, like make a mounting bracket to have a robot arm on one of my little robots.
Right. But I mean, but what I'm wanting to know
which would be much harder to do some other way.
Right. But okay, what I wanted to know is, since we're talking about Maker Faire, is you have these 23 different models, a bajillion people who have them. What projects were they showing?
Well, most of them were just showing the printers themselves, right? The ones that actually had the printers.
Okay.
Some of them, like the whole thing with the RepRap is that you print the plastic parts of a RepRap using a RepRap,
mm-hmm.
right? So it's replicating itself partially by printing out the pieces that go into helping make it. They did have a bunch of replicators in a booth outside that were printing little robots that they had a robot petting zoo for kids, right? They were just little plastic robots that were stuck on some base,
mm-hmm.
prefab base that were just sort of running around in a little pen, and the little kids could go in there and play with them,
mm-hmm.
right? So it was, I don't have a concrete example for you because I haven't figured out my concrete example yet
mm-hmm.
of what I want, but I'm imagining that I'll be able to do some really cool stuff once I, figure out what it is that I want to make.
Well, at the at the Lighthouse School that I was mentoring at, one of the groups actually was working on making a 3D laser scanner, so it'd project a laser line and then use a video cam capture to develop a computerized 3D model of objects. And they got the design off the internet. I don't think it was a Thingiverse thing, but anyway, they got all the STL files for all the gear trains and little brackets that would hold the laser and the camera and that stuff. And they printed those all out on the MakerBot. And, it was really pretty amazing to see them because the quality is quite good. They're certainly serviceable. And it enables you to prototype. You don't have to sort of adapt your project to the parts that you can find. You can actually really make custom purpose-built parts for projects. Mm-hmm. I've thought of a few things that I'd like to do with a MakerBot. It's things like make little brackets to hold cameras that are odd shaped, even like your iPhone or an iPad. If you could make little clips and brackets and things like that, you could, that would be great. I've used to build telescopes. There's some telescope hardware that would be kind of nice to print. Just weird stuff, cases for electronic projects that are specialized, to be the right size, all sorts of things like that's, the reason that you may not actually come up with these ideas right away is you've never had the ability to do this right away. And so you're just not used to thinking about, well, if I could actually just think up a design and put it in, use some software to design it and just print it in an afternoon, what could I really make? And I think that as you have them, they seem to, it expands your thinking like any good tool does.
That's actually one of the things that's holding me up a little bit, is that I'm not very good at the modeling part of it. Like making my own shape in a modeling tool that's correct and then printing it out and getting what I want. Although that's changed a little bit with the Autodesk 123D because it's really easy. But it's still, it's still a learning process for me. And once I get better at that and I can model something to print out, then I'll start printing all kinds of cool stuff.
Sure.
Whereas you guys already have modeling capability. So if you modeled something and you had a 3D printer and it printed out right away, you'd be able to like do all kinds of cool stuff. You could make your own pen and tilt thing that would work.
Yeah. But the calibration. That's another cuss
it's
word.
Actually not.
That's
it's
another
really
cuss
not
word
that
in
bad.
my.
I mean, the broader
book.
range of printers that we saw at Maker Faire is suggesting that the mechanical calibration things are being solved. I mean, the vast majority of the printer stuff printed that I saw was actually, the quality was quite good. I mean, and these were replicated over, certainly the MakerBot replicators and things like that seem to really produce, high quality stuff. And, they obviously drug them out to a tent and set them up. I don't think they spent, hours and hours tweaking each individual one to make these prints. So,
yeah. I mean, the only thing that I had to do with the replicator, I got the new flat plate for it. When it first came, it was warped. But since then, the only thing you have to do is level the plate. And they have a procedure built into the controller where you push a button and it goes through a sequence and you adjust the dials on the bottom of the plate to line it up. And it takes like 5 minutes to line up the plate and then you're ready to print. It's not that bad. The only bad thing that you would consider bad anyways is every once in a while you have to like redo the tape on the Kapton tape on your build platform because it gets messed up as you print and peel things off of it. And that's kind of a bit of a process to peel off the old tape and put on new tape and make sure there's no bubbles and anything. But you only do that like once every couple months or something, depending on how often you print, obviously. If you print a whole lot, then you do it once a week or every other week or something.
Sure.
But it's more of a straightforward maintenance now. Like I had all kinds of problems with the Huxley because I rushed through building the kit and I had no idea what I was doing when I was doing it. And that was one of those things where I learned a lot about how 3D printers work because I had to like figure it out to solve getting that thing to print right. So, I don't mind that it took me a long time and I printed out, a pound worth of crappy little cubes, getting it all sorted out because I learned a whole lot about how they work. Right?
Roy's not afraid to fail.
Well, it was just like
this year at Maker Faire, a lot of 3D printers, a lot of kids, a lot of people from our community, obviously, and some really cool, like complicated big projects too, like the flight simulator.
I have one more question though.
We really don't have time.
Okay, but so you guys have to keep your responses in under a minute.
Don't have 2 minutes.
For this last one. Okay, well, I'll try. Okay. What one project would you take to the zombie apocalypse bunker? You have to do this. It's ZombieTech.
They've already both answered this question.
No, you wouldn't take a flight simulator to the ZombieTech.
No.
Which Maker Faire project?
Shows.
Yeah.
I don't know. A Tesla.
I don't know. Yeah,
Okay.
Tesla would be good. I think that big flaming dragon thing would be awesome.
Well, yeah.
They had this like ginormous mechanical dragon that shot propane out, and like I don't even care. It scared humans. It'd scare zombies.
It wasn't moving, but it actually has wheels and could move around, so you could ride it.
Yeah,
that big
that's
metal
cool.
dragon. Climb up
would,
on top and burn zombies with your metal dragon.
that would be cool.
Okay, so
As for the usual
So I have a
ZombieTech questions, they
big, we'll have a
both
big dragon.
these guys have been on the show before, so you'll have to
Well, I
listen to
know.
Roy's episode to get his answers
Yeah.
and Mark's.
There's
to
a
get
whole-
his.
There's a whole bunch of people I just now remembered and didn't get to say
Yeah,
that I saw. You know,
it's way bigger than we've actually managed to portray in this limited time. So, if you can get a chance to go, it's way fun.
And if you can't get out to one of the big maker fairs on the coasts, there's lots and lots of mini maker fairs all over the country and all over the world now. So
yes.
Yep.
And they may, in fact, be even more fun because you'll get a chance to interact with people more closely and more time and more energy and probably a little less commercial too.
Mm-hmm.
So
there won't be 100,000 people either.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So real quickly here, I mean, is there anything other than Maker Faire stuff that you guys would like to leave links for?
I really found the fair inspiring. I've actually got a couple small ideas for projects that might start happening as a result, and with the idea that maybe I'd have something next year. So I've got to plug my blog. I'm always talking about things that I'm working on. It's been a little sparse lately. I apologize to my the people who frequent my blog, but and just if you have a crazy project, go bring it to the Maker Faire. Absolutely bring it to the Maker Faire. I would love to see your projects there.
Cool. brainwagon.com.org.net. Awesome.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
Roy
I haven't
doesn't do
updated
a website thing. I mean,
Well,
he's
I
got his
have a
blog.
blog.
He's a slacker.
I haven't updated in a while, but I have a whole bunch of pictures and little video clips and whatnot, and I plan to post about the Parallax trip and the Maker Faire trip so people can get more information on that as soon as I post it over the next week.
And where's your blog at, Roy?
It's rpef.blogspot.com.
Okie dokie. And both these guys are on Twitter, at Brainwagon and at Roy Eltham.
Yep, and they can be found in our IRC, Toy Makers on Afternet.
Every day.
Every day.
Yep. And of course, you guys can find this show every Thursday at ZombieTech.tv. Addie and I are always available on Twitter at tymkrs. Until next week, that's it for us. Bye.
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 Bye.